Okay, so can you still game share a Nintendo Switch or can you not? A lot of people are talking about, hey, Nintendo Switch version 20.0, it ruined everything, virtual game cards, everything's super complicated now. Now we can't game share in the same way that we used to. Don't get this confused with Nintendo's game share. Their game share is the idea of certain games on the Nintendo Switch 2 could be shared with other people so you could play them together at the same time with other Nintendo Switch 2 consoles or certain Switch 1 consoles. Very confusing. Obviously, Nintendo's communication really bad, which is making this whole situation worse. I'm going to try my very best to clarify this to the best of my ability in this video. Please bear with me. It is a massive one. I have a bunch of links open. I got a bunch of screenshots. I got a bunch of everything. So let me put on my glasses and things are about to get real. All right, let's go ahead and jump straight into this. What am I talking about? Version 20.0 introduced virtual cards. First thing that really sucks about virtual cards is that you cannot share. So basically, virtual cards has the ability to lend out games. If you don't know about that, I did a whole walkthrough in my video about version or update 20.0. I'll link it down in the description below. To kind of catch you up very briefly, essentially, digital games have sort of a virtual card, if you will, that can be lent out to family members specifically. It has to be people that are part of your family member's plan. If they're part of your family member plan, though, they also have to be very close to you. You have to be like in the same room to basically do it, or same house or whatever, in a general kind of location. So for example, if I want to share, my parents have a Switch, if I want to share virtual game cards with my parents, I can't do it if we're in two different locations, which really sucks because there's games that, you know, my mom would have liked to play that I have, that she doesn't have, that I have them digitally that I would have liked to lend out to her. But now I can't do that because you have to be in the same room. So that's the first thing that's confusing that really sucks about virtual game cards. Okay. The second thing is that let me explain this best of my ability, because this is very difficult. If I throw up a screenshot, you can see some restrictions. This is from Nintendo support. So here's some of the restrictions. You and the borrower must have your consoles in proximity to each other, right? That's what I just said, to be able to lend or borrow a game. The borrower must be part of your Nintendo account family group. Okay, sure, that's understandable. So far, you can lend up to 3 virtual games at a time, so no more than 3, and only 1 per person. So you can lend out 1 to 3 different people on your family account, but they all have to be in the same household or same, well, you have to be in proximity to each other. So you don't have to be in the same household. You can kind of meet up for a minute or something and then do it while you're face to face, and then you can go on your separate ways, and they can play the virtual game card away from you. It's just to actually lend them out. It's kind of like lending a physical game. You actually have to see the person. So I guess it kind of makes sense, but it's still like, why not just do it over the internet? But whatever. The borrower, like I said, can only borrow 1 game at a time. They cannot borrow games from multiple different people at once either. You can only lend 1 virtual game card at a time to a particular console, even if multiple family members have users on that console. What does that mean? For example, let's say my son has his own account and my daughters have their own account, and I want to lend a game to my son and I want to lend a game to my daughters, and they have 2 different accounts, but they're on the same console. I can't do it, even though they're 2 different accounts. That's another thing that really sucks. And you're probably like, where's the game sharing? I have to explain virtual cards to get to the game sharing. Like I said, bear with me. You cannot lend out a virtual game card to a console that has users from multiple different family groups on the console. So what does that mean? If you have, let's say there's 2 people on a console, for example, and they're from 2 different family member groups or whatever, then you cannot lend games to that console. Any members, if there's multiple accounts on a console, every account on that console has to be part of the family group. Very weird and confusing, but sure, let's just, make everything more complicated. When you lend a game, any DLC you've purchased is also lent. I don't know if that's really a restriction. I don't know why that's under the restriction category. And then it's going to be lent for 14 days and it's going to be automatically, given back, or you can collect them at an earlier date as the borrower. Now, that's how virtual game cards work. Why am I explaining this? Because this is essentially replacing what was game sharing, as people are calling it, before. What is game sharing? Well, it was the ability, and some people, this is where things get really confusing, because you have 2 different groups of people. You have a group of people that are like, I didn't think this existed. I had no idea that this existed. I thought only 1 console could play the game at a time. And then you have groups that are like, no, listen, I've been doing this for years, and this is something that was 100% in as a feature, where it's kind of like PlayStation and Xbox, right? Where it's like you have a primary console and a secondary console, and as long as one console is set to primary, any user on that primary console, they can they can all play the game at the exact same time as the person who's on the secondary console. So for example, if I wanted the GameShare, like let's say again with my wife, right, on her Switch, well, what I would do is I would set her Switch to primary for my account. That means that she can play on her own account on that console, and then on my Switch, I can continue to play. It would be like a secondary console, exactly like PlayStation and Xbox, if you understand how that works. But that is no longer the case anymore. That's how it was before. Just to prove it, there's too many sources to show. This is a very random Reddit source. I'll throw it up on screen. This is a person basically saying that them and their sister have been doing this forever. The game sharing feature, basically, you know, it was a digital game. They were able to play at the same time. Okay, after updating to 20.0, you can no longer do this. It can kind of work with a little caveat, but there's it's not the same way, and I'll explain it in just a second here. And because again, there's been you know, YouTubers and social media posts and different things like that are like, this is how you do it. Not really, because there's a whole caveat to that. Even Nintendo had an official section on their support website previously that they now have removed. You can find it on Web Archive, but it had said if you want to play your game at the same time as someone else who plays it, this is how you do it. So they were even explaining how to do it previously, but again, that's no longer there. So again, you can see this person's Reddit post. You can read the whole thing if you would like to, but essentially they're confirming they were able to play the same game at the same time. But that's no longer the case. Why? Well, now the whole thing has changed. I think that is probably because they're introducing their own GameShare feature on Nintendo Switch 2. But other people have noted that Nintendo apparently claimed, I could not find the source for this. I really tried. This is the only thing I could not find a source for. Apparently Nintendo had claimed that this feature was not going away with this new update. I don't know if that's true, and I can't confirm that, but people are saying that. I just thought it would be worth mentioning. Now, like I said, there's a little loophole, but I need to kind of explain this whole other thing, which is very confusing. Let's go back to Nintendo support. If we go on one of the support Nintendo Switch system update information, this is for 20.0. At the very bottom of the page, it talks about that the term primary console with the transition to virtual game cards is now called pass-enabled console. So let's just make it more confusing, but all right. On a console that is set as pass-enabled console for a user, all users on the console can access certain subscriptions or passes for some software. Okay, so how does this work? Let me explain this really quick because, you know, this is going to be something that maybe people are like wondering, well, what if I do this? If we go to the eShop on the Switch, basically what you're going to do is you're going to load the eShop on your console, on your account. Whatever console, this is what Nintendo was explaining, whatever console that you end up setting or opening the eShop on that account, which makes even less sense, is going to end up being set as the pass-enabled console. This is another page from Nintendo support. And then what they say is to complete these steps, you're going to, of course, link your Nintendo account on the Switch console that you want to register as your pass-enabled console. You select the Nintendo eShop. You select the user that your Nintendo account is linked to. And then when the eShop launches, this console is now registered as your pass-enabled console. And if you want to change it, you basically go to the eShop. You go to your little icon at the top right corner. When you go there, you go over to the right. You go all the way to the bottom. You scroll all the way to the bottom. And once you get to the bottom, there's a little option that says pass-enabled console. You can deregister this console as your pass-enabled console. And to make things more confusing, they actually have a text that says this console is registered as your primary console. So on one hand, they're still calling it primary console, but yet they say it's been, you know, replaced with pass-enabled console. What does this do? Exactly what I just kind of basically essentially read you is that the pass-enabled thing is so that you can have certain like subscriptions and stuff. Like they say like Just Dance Plus or whatever. So this also doesn't really work. People have tried it. This doesn't work to do what we were doing, you know, previously. So to make things even more confusing, if I go to my accounts on Nintendo.com, there's a portal. So if you go to accounts.nintendo.com/portal, you can see your own portal. And there's a section to click passes. If you click passes, what you're going to see is the pass-enabled console. First of all, at the bottom, it says pass-enabled console, deregister the console. If you can't use passes on the system you want to play on, try removing it using the buttons below. That's another way to do it if you don't want to do it through the eShop. But what's weird is that it shows me that I have have no usable passes and no passes in use, because what's weird about that is, like, I guess that it's not Nintendo Switch Online, but again, this is, I guess, certain things like they mentioned Just Dance Plus or whatever, certain subscriptions. So this is very specific. This has nothing to do with game sharing. So I wanted to mention that because there's going to be people who will be like, hey, just do pass enabled console. That doesn't work either. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. But there is another thing. So with all of that aside, there is a workaround, but there's a caveat. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go over to the system settings. If we go to system settings on our Switch, and again, we're gonna be going all the way down to, okay, so you're gonna go to system settings, you're gonna go scroll down to user settings, and then you're gonna click online license settings. When you do that, it's gonna be off by default. You can read what it says. When turned on, you can play downloadable or downloaded software you've purchased while the system is connected to the internet, even if you don't have a virtual game card loaded. However, only the owner of the purchasing account can play using the software's online license, and other users will not be able to play at the same time. This will allow you so you can sort of game share, but it has to do with offline, so mostly single player games. You're not gonna be able to play like Mario Kart 8 or Splatoon, whatever, 2 or 3 online at the same time, like a lot of people have been doing up until now. So what you would want to do for this at least half-baked, workaround is you would turn use online license on, and then what you're going to want to do is, so, you're going to have your primary console, secondary console, and one of the consoles is going to have to go and turn off an internet connection. So either go in your settings, turn off the internet, or if you hold down the home button, you can turn on airplane mode, but this of course doesn't work while you're docked. You have to be holding it in handheld mode, but that's another kind of way to do it. And when you do that, you will be able to game share still, but not the way you used to be able to do it. That's why I'm saying there's a caveat, right? Because what you can do now is you can play single player games. You can download the single player games. Other accounts on that console are going to be able to play those games. But again, if you want to play these single player games at the same time, one of the consoles is going to have to be in airplane mode or off the internet, like no internet connection, which is a really weird loophole and workaround. And again, this does not work for multiplayer games, which has been a lot of people's kind of thing, is they want to be able to do this with multiplayer games, right? So again, it seems like it's not a thing unless there's some weird thing everybody's missing. But I've been digging and digging and digging. A lot of people have been digging, and there seems to be no other workaround. This new pass enabled thing, it doesn't work. The only thing, like I said, is this. It doesn't fully fix the whole thing to make it the way it was, like the way PlayStation and Xbox does, but it is a little workaround. Okay, so all that aside, one last thing I do want to note. Does this make Nintendo greedy? A lot of people are freaking out, like, oh, see, Nintendo's so freaking greedy, man. And I get it. It's something we've been enjoying for a long time on PlayStation, on Xbox, on Nintendo up until now, even though like half the people didn't even know this kind of was a thing until now. But I don't think that a company removing this makes them greedy. I think it's something that was a privilege, right? It's like a parent saying, like, okay, you've enjoyed having internet access in our household, to their kids. It's like, well, we're getting rid of the internet or something, it's like, yeah, you're bummed out, you're upset about not having, that access, but it's not, it's just something that sucks for you. It's not something that makes the company in this case necessarily greedy. It's been pretty crazy that we've been able to do this on Nintendo up until now, and even on other consoles that they've allowed us to be able to essentially share our games, so we can not have to buy the game twice, and share it with one other person. But that's kind of a big deal. I mean, that's typically something that companies didn't do for the longest time. And if you think about it, I mean, it doesn't really make sense for companies to do that. It's just been something that we've been privileged to kind of enjoy. So I don't know, that's kind of my two thoughts on that to kind of end this video. I don't think it's a greed issue. We really don't like it. I don't like it. It sucks. I get it. I wholeheartedly get it. It really sucks. But yeah, I don't know. I think let's be reasonable with how we kind of approach this. But either way, let me know what you think in the comments section below. Are you at least happy that there's a little workaround for single player games? Are you really upset? Do you really not care? Like I said, I think with the Switch 2 implementing, their own game share, and this is going to be very specific, for specific games. It's not going to work with every single game. That's probably why Nintendo did this, but it's still very confusing. Makes no sense. The wording, the phrasing, everything, the communication is really bad and it's confusing people, and that's why I wanted to make this video. And I hope this video did not confuse you more and instead clarified things. If it was more confusing, let me know in the comments. If it was clarifying, consider leaving a like. Really helps the channel. Subscribe for more Nintendo content and let me know your thoughts. Stick around for more. And if I missed anything, let me know in the comments, because this was a huge topic. And if anything changes, I'll make an updated video at a later date. Till then, game on. I'll see you guys later.